Hello everyone, welcome to Deep Learning Dots. Welcome to my second video on this series about the attention mechanism. Now, to start this video, I want to take a little bit of a recap because I think the concepts that we talked about in the first video are quite important. And the amount of effort that we put into intuition building, that was 20 whole minutes, man. The amount of effort that we put into building the intuition behind the attention mechanism should not go to waste. So let's take a recap of the neural image caption generation example that we have over here. I talked about the attention mechanism is going to be returning a set of weights for each pixel in the image. I said that the weights, all of the weights combined are always going to sum up to 1. And as input, what I'm providing to the attention mechanism is this image itself, which is going to be the group of things from which I'm going to tell which things are important, as well as I gave the attention mechanism a variable to convey the state of the current translation. So in this particular example, the model had predicted a woman is throwing a and was going to predict the next word as frisbee, right? And there I had a hidden variable which sort of represented a single fixed length vector. I had a single fixed length vector which is supposed to be representing the sentence that has been predicted till now. That was one input to the attention mechanism. The other input was the image itself, and the attention mechanism told me, okay, which parts of this image are important. It did that by assigning a weight to each pixel. And the other example we looked at was of translation, where the input I provided to the attention mechanism was the current state of predictedness, the words that I had predicted till now, as well as the source sentence. And the attention mechanism again was going to tell me to predict the next word, which word should I be focusing on. And then we talked about the context vector, which is supposed to be a single fixed length vector encapsulating all of that information, encapsulating the information from my group of things, which things are important, right? Those are the things that we discussed in the first video. Now in this second video, we are going to try to take a look at what all of this looks like from the inside, right? Now this is the exact same cell that we talked about the last time, and this is the context vector which is supposed to be representing encoder outputs, which is my list of things, but encoder outputs is one vector for each entity, but the context vector is supposed to be one vector representing all of the entities in this encoder outputs with weights attached to it, right? So let's talk about what the attention mechanism might look like from the inside. I have defined the attention mechanism over here, but I want to talk about what we can deduce from what we know of what the attention mechanism is, going to look like. So just to be able to talk through my deduction, right? I have a hidden shape. I have encoder outputs dot shape. Right, these are my two inputs to the attention mechanism. The hidden variable sort of representing the current state I am in, and the encoder outputs variable is sort of representing my group of entities, and I'm going to be returning a weight for those group of entities. So what do I think the attention mechanism looks like from inside? I think we can deduce it from here. What I'm going to do is that for each, okay, what I'm going to do is I have 14 things over here. I am going to create 14 copies of this variable. The vector, I'm going to create 14 copies of this particular vector, right? After that, I am going to perform some operation with each of the 14 entities, right? That makes sense. And in that operation, via that operation, I am going to get some score, okay? And so what I've done here, I'm going to generate 14 copies, and each of those 14 copies is going to be interacting somehow with each of the 14 items in this particular variable. Via that interaction, I am going to generate some score, right? And once I have generated that score, I am going to normalize that score from my previous assertion of that all of the weights are supposed to sum up to 1, okay? Now, this is exactly what is going to happen inside my attention function, okay? Now, the only two additional components to the attention mechanism are going to be these two variables. Okay, these two variables are supposed to be representing two linear layers. Okay, what does a linear layer do? One should be really confident about it. So we're gonna take a second to talk about what a linear layer is supposed to do. A linear layer that I have sort of printed out what the attention variable is containing over here. It is supposed to take in, it is saying it's supposed to take in 10 features and is supposed to give out 5 features. Now what that means is it is going to take as input a vector of size 10, and as output it is going to give a vector of size 5. Now another thing that I want to talk about at some later point in another video is what a linear layer is supposed to represent. There is a particular visual regarding a linear layer which is really important, right? A linear layer is supposed to be performing what is called a linear transformation. There are certain properties associated to the linear transformation, and there is a really beautiful visual associated with the linear transformation. And once you have seen that visual, it sort of changes how you look at things in deep learning, right? However, coming back to the topic at hand, this linear layer is supposed to take in a vector of size 10, and it is supposed to give out as an output a vector of size 5. These are the additional two components of the attention function, right? With these two things and my output, I am going to be generating a set of weights. Let's take a look at how we've done that. So what I've done here is I have taken all of the important lines and I have copy pasted them over here. Okay, over here, right? So I'm going to be doing something over here, and so I have essentially taken each line of the function and I've put them in different cells so we can literally walk through the entire function. Okay, so let's talk about what the implementation looks like from here. What's happening here is I have encoder outputs. I'm over here assigning the batch size. From our previous discussion, we talked about how this number in the middle with index 1 is supposed to be representing the batch size, and it is supposed to be representing the number of examples, the number of sentences that I'm talking about. And in this particular example, that sentence is 1. We are going to be continuing the example of neural machine translation where this is the input sentence and this is the output sentence, right? Coming back, the batch size over here is 1. The source length is supposed to be representing number of items in my group of things, right? So I've already talked about what the encoder outputs is supposed to represent. It is supposed to represent a group of things. Each thing is being represented by a vector. The source length here is taking in the variable of 14. Sorry, I've not implemented this, and that's why it's at 14. That's why it's at 100. Like I said, since there are 14 entities in the encoder outputs variable, source length is 14. Hidden shape, this particular variable is supposed to be representing in a fixed length vector the state of the prediction. Now what I've done here is I have created 14 copies of the state variable, right? Here I've rearranged the encoder outputs a bit, which just makes it easier for me to do the next operation. But I have here created 14 copies of the state variable. And after this, I'm going to make it interact. I am going to make it interact with each entity in my encoder outputs variable. So let's see how we're going to do that. Now, making the state variable interact with each entity in my group of things, right, has a special name, just like with everything else in computer science and deep learning. That particular name is the energy function. Where is this name coming from? I am trying to compute the energy, or what also you can think of, I am trying to calculate the synergy between each entity and the state, right? So that is what I am doing over here. I am calculating the energy, which is going to be a numerical entity, between the state variable as well as each item in my group of things, each item in my encoder outputs variable. So let's just walk through deep learning and PyTorch. All implementations of research papers are full of things where just an insane amount of activity happens in the smallest number of lines, right? And this is going to be true for all of the things that you're going to see in the future. So be ready for that. And what we're going to try to do here is we are going to break down this energy function. We are going to see how a weight is generated, which after implementing the energy function, all I have to do is normalize it. Okay, normalize it is not that big of a deal. I know some techniques how to normalize it. Divide it by the largest entity, right? That's one way of normalizing it. Find the mean and divide it by that. That's one other way of normalizing. There are techniques of normalization that you should be aware of as some student of mathematics. You must have studied mathematics in some way or the other. Calculating the percentages is a way of normalization. So normalization does not scare me. The energy function, since I don't know about it, is a mystery to me. So we're going to talk about what the energy function is going to do here now. So the hidden variable here is now representing 14 copies of the variable that is depicting the state, right? No. Yeah. So like I said, let me just delete this variable. I was doing some activity before this. The hidden variable was previously representing in a single fixed length vector of size 5, which is still, the output is still available over here, the state, and I have now created 14 copies of it, right? One for each item in my encoder outputs. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to concatenate them. I am going to concatenate them along this dimension, right? So now they should just stack up. So let's just see that how that happens. I'm gonna break it down. So let's just see what that looks like. What am I doing wrong here? What am I? Oh, I'm sorry. Right. So I have simply concatenated them along this particular dimension. This is what the torch cat function has done for me. Now, I have 14 vectors of size 10, right? And I am going to pass them through a linear layer. Now we've already discussed that what the linear layer is going to do is it is going to take as input vectors of size 10. Let's just go back to this particular variable here. What attention is doing is sorry, what just happened? It is going to take in a vector of size 10 and it is going to output a vector of size 5. So that is what I am expecting to happen now, right? So let's take a look at that. I apologize, guys. Apologize to my viewers for the reduction in speed. So like I said, after passing vectors of size 10 through the linear layer, I have gotten back 14 vectors of size 5, right? And with that, after that, I am going sort of applying the activation function. The activation function is, again, I am just applying a numerical operation to each entity, right? I had 14 and the dimensions have stayed the same. I had 14 entities which were inside represented by vectors of size 5 after it had passed through the attention linear layer over here, and then I have just applied the tanh function onto them, right? Tanh function is like a one-to-one mapping. It takes in one output, it gives out another output. So it's like calculating the sine of a particular angle or something like that, right? Tanh is supposed to be inverse of a tan, so tanh is supposed to take in, but that property still holds true is what I'm trying to convey here, that it is going to give in, I'm going to provide one entity, one number as input to the tanh function, and is going to give out one output. Okay, cool. Now V is another linear layer. V is another linear layer which is taking in 5 entities and giving out one. And I think that's what we were after, right? We were after one score for each of the 14 entities. And when I pass this particular energy variable to the V linear layer, I am going to get that, right? So let me take a look at that. Where is that line of code? It seems like I have not written that line of code, but we can take a look at it from inside the attention function, right? Let me just take this line of code over here. and okay, it seems like I have done something that was not supposed to be done. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So, sorry, this usually does happen when you're implementing a lot of things on Jupyter notebooks, but I love the Jupyter notebook environment. Moving on, coming back to, after I've passed the energy variable through the linear layer V, I have one entity representing each of the 14 entities over here, right? Just taking a step back so that we know what we're talking about, right? So energy variable was supposed to be, after I am passing it through the attention linear layer, I have concatenated hidden each variable from the, I've created, okay, let's take it from the start, right? No point in beating the bush. I have created 14 copies of my state variable. After that, I have concatenated them so that I get vectors which are of size 10. After that, I have passed them through a linear layer which takes in 10 entities and gives out 5 entities. And at the end, I've applied a tanh function. After that, I have taken the outputs over here and passed them through another linear layer, which in the end gives me 14 single valued variables, right? Look at this beautiful output. This is what I was after. This, each number is sort of representing a synergy score between the state and an item, and each item in my group of things, right? Now let's try to think back of the broad statements that I had made. I'd said that I have one fixed length vector representing the state, and I have a group of things, a group of entities where each entity is being represented by a fixed length vector again, and the attention function is going to return a weight for each entity. And how I've done that, I have sort of calculated the synergy between the state and each entity in my group of things. Now this particular step is the last step, and this is the normalization step, right? And this is the softmax function. And at this particular stage, softmax is again one of those things that I could talk about some of the aspects of the softmax function, and I will be doing that in a prelims video about in the context of natural language processing, some basics about deep learning in that video as well. But as of right now, the only thing that you need to know about the softmax function is, given a set of scores, right, it normalizes it in such a fashion so that all of the scores sum up to 1, right? And with that, I have the weights for each entity in my group of things. Now, one question that I do not want to exceed my welcome again, and we're going to be discussing this in the next video, is that, is this energy function special, right? Concatenating hidden states and my list of things, each entity in my list of things, passing them to a linear layer, and then passing them to a linear layer again with an activation function in the middle. How does someone come up with that? And are there alternates to it available? So in short, the answer is yes. Obviously, alternates to that have been explored in different research papers. One of those research papers is this: effective approaches to attention-based neural machine translation. This is a paper by the famous professor Manning from Stanford, and in here I have taken this particular image from this paper. And in this paper, he also introduces a new kind of energy function, a new way of making these things interact with each other. Now, just to cover an alternate energy function quickly, right? Here, I have reinitialized the same variables all over again. Here, this is supposed to be representing 3 entities, and each of the entity is being represented by a fixed length vector of size 5. And this encoder outputs is again my list of things, and the attention function is gonna tell me which of these things is important, and the hidden variable is supposed to be representative of the state, right? Now, okay, so what I'm going to do here is I am not going to be explaining the entire thing. And I actually took this implementation of the attention function from, well, let me just look for it. Just give me a second, hopefully. Like I said, Papers with Code is an excellent platform to discover implementations of code. Okay, and the paper that we talked about in the beginning, the translation paper, and if you remember, I mentioned that this paper has been credited with inventing the attention mechanism. So you can go here. These are a couple of 98 implementations of this particular paper, and you can take a look at the implementation. So this is sort of what the audience can consider this as homework, right? This is an alternate implementation of the energy function. Okay. This is the general implementation of the attention function. What we discovered here, what we saw here, was another implementation I had taken from some other author on GitHub, which was the concat implementation of the energy function. This particular example that I've taken from this particular author over here implements the general implementation. Now I can just show you the get attention score, right? It is passing it through a linear layer. It is passing the encoder output, my entity from my group of things through a linear layer here, and after that it is performing a dot multiplication. I hope you are familiar with what a dot product of two vectors look like. So that is what is being performed here, and what this is returning is the energy score, which is going to be in the next step normalized, right? As you can see here, that this particular function is being called over here, and after this the scores are being assigned over here, and after that I am just performing softmax over the scores. Now this is an alternate implementation of an energy function, and we are going to be exploring the simple vanilla dot product of two vectors to calculate the energy function when we are exploring self-attention. So homework is, you should be able to, you are in a state now that if you have some amount of experience with deep learning, even if you don't have, if you are confident, and you should be able to parse through this entire implementation, right, and really understand what is happening. Okay. Now one thing that you will require is a brief tutorial to RNNs, recurrent neural networks. So that is how we deal with text before we get into transformers. That is another topic that we will be covering in hopefully the next video. You should be able to look at this implementation, use a PDB debugger to step through the entire thing, and all of this should make sense. So this is the implementation that I had taken. So yeah, this is where I want to end the video, that there are other implementations of the energy function, and in all probability the world is just full of so many excellent people. There are no doubt going to be more inventions of more energy functions which are more effective in some way or the other, right? Now with this, I have assigned homework to you, as well as what I want to say is, in the next video we are going to be covering self-attention. It's going to be an interesting video. I am really excited to cover this particular video, because once we have discovered self-attention, we can go full throttle into implementations of the transformer models, and that is just going to be fun as hell, right? Further readings, you are also in a state where you can look at implementations of papers, as well as you can read research papers now. Okay, now that you have developed an intuition about the attention mechanism, you should definitely read this paper, which is sort of responsible for discovering the attention function, and you can read this paper over here, which is responsible for introducing an alternate implementation of the attention function. So what this paper is doing is essentially, it is sort of playing around with the inputs of the attention function a bit. That is all. So you should be able to look at the implementation of this paper as well as read this paper as well, right? There might be things you might not understand in the first go, but this is where reiterating stuff is going to help. You're going to read it again and again a couple of times, and ask questions on forums as well. You can ask questions to me as well. I will try to answer them with the best of my capabilities. So with that, thank you. See you in the next one. Goodbye.